we are at Lion Paw here in San Ignacio in Cayo in Belize. And so today, what we're doing is we have Afro flower, African waist bead training. So here we have some traditional African waist beads. So what are waist beads? They're trending right now. I've been wearing them for over 30 years. I was introduced to them when I was taking African dance many years ago before I became a mom. And so now we have many women in the diaspora, African Americans wear them. You can find them anywhere you find Afro women and women of Afro descent wearing waist beads. And right now it's trending, so now we even have other women starting to wear them for style. However, waist beads do have a purpose. They have many purposes. Africa is not a country, it's a continent with many countries within it. So you'll find them in Nigeria, you'll find them in Ghana, you'll find them throughout the diaspora. And as an Afro person of Caribbean and Afro-American descent, I wear a waist bead. Sometimes I can wear one, sometimes I can wear up to 10, and I wear them for different purposes. So I am Body-Culinary, professional chef, personal trainer, natural born woman. Shout out to all you people, whatever your expression is. And today I have a young Afro flower with me. I have Naya. Say hello, Naya. And we're at Lions Paw. So are you familiar with waist beads? Yeah. Okay, so what do you know about waist beads?
I just know they're for style.
You know they're for style, okay. So good, so let's talk about what waist beads are, and I'll share with you some of what I know of the origins of waist beads. And as Naya said, right, what's your age? 17, so she's 17, so she says she knows of them for style. And I think it's very, very important that we wear things with some cultural significance, especially in this day and age where many of us may not be connected with the importance and the sacredness of our womb, our sacred reproductive organs, keeping them healthy, as well as keeping our waistlines healthy so that we don't have diabetes and the comorbidities of other diseases that run with it, right? So one of the reasons that waist beads are made, and they have different colors and different types of beads that are made from different types of glass. In Africa, sometimes people will recycle glass to make the different beads, and the colors have different reasons. What mothers will do, mothers will make waist beads for their daughters. And let's say like if a young woman is now coming to a rites of passage, where she's going from a little girl to become a woman, her mother and maybe other women and aunties will gift her with a set of waist beads to, as they're counseling her and giving you information on what it means, what's happening with your cycle, the changes that are happening with your body, with your womb, as you start to let go of your sacred moon or your sacred blood, as your sacred breasts start to change shape. So today, a lot of those conversations are not being had. Have you had any of those conversations? So we have whole generations that are not receiving any training. Most of their training is coming from mimicking, no offense, hip-hop music, which I grew up on hip-hop, but now it's a whole other thing. Now we got WAP-it. So we're going to press pause on that just for a moment because we're very diverse. There are many meanings to this. Also, when babies are born, some African women will take the beads and they'll put them around the little girl's waist, right? So that as she's growing, she's more aware of her waist, and they will put beads on a little boy on his wrist. So traditionally, we don't put waist beads on a man's waist, right? Sometimes you'll also find different types of cowrie shells and gold adornments, sometimes little bells even on them. A lot of times we also wear them for when we're dancing. So one of the other purposes of the waist beads is to remind you of your femininity, right? These are conversations you don't have when you're a little girl. And so what does that mean, femininity? There are, with people expressing themselves all kinds of ways, but if you are a womb carrier, a carrier of a womb, you're the human being that can portal human life onto this planet, right? And that's a very, very sacred act. So we don't want to just be letting anyone and everything into our womb, because without education, that has extreme consequences, right? Now we hear the term narcissism. Have you heard that term? Right. So basically, people with piss poor behavior, no kind of conscience. These are the types of people that are running around rampant on the planet. But perhaps something for us to consider as women is being very, very, very intentional about who we choose to parent with, right? Because a lot of us complain about the men folks, but if we are choosing people that, they're not interested in being fathers, and that is demonstrated with actions, tangible actions. So it is for women to be very, very purposeful and intentional. You know what a vetting process process is? Have you ever heard the term vet? Right, vet, you might think veterinarian, right? A vetting process. So Naya, I'm gonna put this in your ear. A vetting process. You can share this with your friends. Shout out to Brooklyn Massive, Belize Massive, Barbados, Queens, Long Island City, Haiti, Africa, Congo, all my girls from South Africa. Giving you all a shout out.
Right,
Cuba.
every time.
So a vetting process. A vetting process means that you do a background check. So you might be looking at the, guy with the six-pack, but that doesn't tell you about the health of his reproductive organs, because right now the rates of STDs and STIs, that means sexual transmitted infections, sexually transmitted diseases. See, that doesn't sound cool while we sitting here posing, but it's a lot of women that are getting all different types of diseases. Some of these diseases can render you infertile, unable to have children. Some of these diseases, like even HPV, can lead to cancer. There are so many different types of warts, growths. Even if you have a slip-on, a condom on, if you have skin-to-skin contact, there are so many different types of diseases that can still be transmitted as you are swapping bodily fluids, right? Have you ever had this conversation before? Right. So, this may be uncomfortable, but in the red tent, when the women bring the girls in, the young girls, to have the conversations about the changes in your body, and now you're able to have children, now you're able to breastfeed. Are you ready to be a mom? And should you? Do you want to be one day?
No, honestly.
Okay, well, you might be a community auntie or community mom. You might help somebody else with theirs. But we want to be doing this very intentionally. There's nothing like a child being called for and expected and being welcomed in, right? Being prepared for, in terms of not just the Pampers and the cute outfits, right? Because they're babies for a tiny amount of time. But when we're calling for these human beings, these are some people that are really going to be welcomed, and we're being intentional, and we're making sure that all the different things that they need emotionally, mentally, that we're committed to doing that. Now, other than that, we want to make sure that you're staying safe. Also, as women, these are conversations that we're not having with the hip-hop records. Women, when we open ourselves up to be intimate, at that time, intimate with other people, it affects us emotionally, right? And psychologically. So you might just be following the hip-hop records. You may not be prone to depression, or when you make poor decisions at 17 as you become an adult, some of your decisions will stay with you for 25, 30 years plus. So you just can't say, I'm sorry, and take it back, right? Once another human being or a few human beings come forth from it that you weren't prepared to parent, and now you may be locked, a type of marriage, into someone else. So all this different information around health, there's information around your skin and proper hygiene. Part of the training also with Waistbeads is waist training. Now we see a lot of women now you've seen the waist trainers, and everybody want to snatch waist, and people got the BBLs now, which I never thought I would see the day when African women would be injecting stuff in their butt. You don't need that, right? And they do drop. Start looking like a dropping diaper, but that's another story. So part of also the training that you get with Waistbeads is hygiene from the inside. So I know we have lots of sprays and oils and perfumes, but hygiene is also what you're eating, right? So a lot of the things, I used to be a junk food addict and barbecue potato chip addict. We don't think of the inside of our body being clean. You know what most of your body's made of?
I can't answer right now.
Water.
Yeah.
Right? So many of us on our plates, we don't have a lot of water on our plates. And the water, right, quite often as a chef and somebody that specializes in whole, fresh, unprocessed living foods, I like to say we're going to eat a lot of living water, right? So living water is not just the water inside the water bottle. It's the water like you're a living being, right? So inside the fresh, whole fruits, vegetables, nuts, and seeds, they have water that makes your skin very, very pretty and very, very bright. So while we're paying for all of these different benzoyl peroxides, salicylic acid, and all this other stuff, the main hygiene is from what you eat. So if you're eating lots of chips and lots of things that are fried, they're very, very tasty, but they're more so like a party food. They're not furnishing and helping your immune system, right? So your immune system is affected, how your body smells. As young women, nobody wants to be funky, right? So hygiene is coming number one from what we're eating, right? So that's hygiene, right? So if we want pretty skin, right? If you don't want back acne and acne over here, and sometimes just all the stuff, this is the largest eliminator of organs. So everything that we're eating, if there's any junk in there, in addition to our hormones changing as our bodies change, all of that stuff is going to come out of our skin. Does that make sense? Right, so that's hygiene. Also, The womb area, we have our reproductive organs here, right, where we develop and we hold children. And then we have this part, the yoni, right? It's a self-cleansing organism, so nothing is meant to go up there. So we don't want to let random people or random anything into the yoni. This is extremely sacred. So when you're wearing the waist beads, it's a reminder. When you put it on, the waist beads, they can be put on several ways. They're elastic ones, but traditionally the waist beads are tied on. So when the waist beads are tied on, they don't come off. So you want to think of something that you're working on in your life. That could be school, that could be track, you want to be a dancer, something you're trying to focus on, or that maybe I want to stay disease-free and healthy mentally and emotionally. So it's a commitment to yourself. Before somebody with some slick talking and a six-pack comes over and say, hey, boo, you know, let me get some numbers, you know what I'm saying? You look pretty fine. You remember the commitment. You remember the education. And it's right there underneath your clothing, right? Traditionally, the only people that saw your waist beads would be your significant other, right? Or be kept underneath your clothes just for you. It would just be for you. And when you're older, your partner, your significant other would see your waist beads. Now everybody's so trendy. Now people to share waist beads see it more. You may have a pair that you may have up a little bit higher. Let's say if you're trying to lose weight for African, or I call it Afro flower waist training. If you're trying to lose or release, I like to say weight release rather than weight loss, off of your waistline, initially you may tie them. You may want them to be above your waist, and as you release, and as a trainer, let me just say this one thing. People are so focused on weight loss. I like to say weight release, because your body is so intelligent. I want you to thank your acne if you got acne out there, because I used to have a lot of acne. Your body's just communicating to you that something is off. It's trying to release something, so it's a good thing that your body is still working. Your body is cleansing and building all the time. It knows how to release unhealthy weight. The only weight that we ever want to lose is adipose tissue. Have you ever heard that term? Adipose or adipose tissue is fatty tissue. We never want to lose muscle, because that's what gives us a nice toned shape. Unless you're taking steroids in the bathroom and injections, you're not going to get bulky. It's not going to happen, right? So the only weight that we ever want to release from the body, and that's usually connected to eating under stress. Usually we don't do it as much as with children. Now we see more children starting to do that, because we're passing a lot of those habits down as mothers, right? Because children don't what? Children do not buy groceries. Sometimes you'll even find children wanting to eat fruit and eat healthy, right? But they're eating whatever is prepared for them, right? So the body will release weight once you just stop detoxing. Everybody's like, I'm detoxing, I'm fasting, I don't eat carbs. But then you detox. You spend all this money on these expensive herbal products, and then you detox it with the junk. So the body will release the extra weight here when you just have some simple movement, some dance, Afro dance, or some walking, and you just stop putting the junk in it. It's actually not that hard. The challenging part is a cultural addiction and feeling like we can't do without certain foods, right? So, fortunately, you're good. Your waist-hip ratio. So now we're going to bring out Body-Culinary, the trainer. When we see the waist is coming out over the hips, right? Because you know we're curvy, we're naturally curvy, right? Even though she's nice and slim, she's curvy. If we got more curves down here, no problem. But when you see waist on your waist, that's a problem. I'm going to tell you why. Your waist to hip ratio. When your waist is coming out over your hips, that is a precursor. That's a sign. It's a precursor for diabetes and the comorbidities, the diseases that like to hang out in a pack with diabetes, heart disease, and high blood pressure, right? So if you're seeing waist come out over your waistline, that means that your body's not metabolizing what you're eating. It's not breaking it down. Perhaps all those substances masquerading as food that tastes tutti frutti and this color and this dye, the body's showing you that it can't break it down, it can't process it. Now when your body's nice and fresh and brand new, this is how we come out, young and fine. But at some point, how does it go from this to looking like we have several tires around the midsection? So this is not more so than vanity, it is actually very dangerous. The most dangerous place to have adipose tissue is around your waistline. So we don't want to make anybody bad or wrong. This is just something for you to consider. So one of the wonderful things with waist training is this can be a reminder to you, right? It could be weight loss. you'll decide where you want the waist beads to fall. So usually they will fall at the narrowest part of your waist, or you may have them at your navel, or you may have them right here around your hips. Now, if you're going to put them around your hips, you just want to be careful not to let them go too down to your sacred crown around your yoni, so that the beads don't get caught there. So you want to measure your waist to find out where you want them to fall. Now, with waist training, if you overeat or you're too rough, you will pop the waist beads. So this is one of the reasons it makes you very, very conscientious. If you're not used to wearing the waist beads, you want to be very mindful not to hurry up and you gotta have to go to the bathroom and rip them off and just rip the waist beads because you're not used to them being there. So it's a gentle reminder, right? So do you like any particular color? Okay, so good. So one of my favorite colors. So let's talk just a little bit about the colors. Pink is a color a lot of times you find rose quartz, and there are different types of beads. These are glass beads. Pink is a color that represents love, right? So this would be a good reminder of self-love. Gold is very, very royal. The green beads are for healing. So anywhere you see green in nature and you see plants and leaves and spinach and kale, green is a color for healing. There are many women that are dealing with fibroid tumors and cysts, and we have women at younger and younger ages getting fibroids and tumors. Have you ever heard of those? Right, so we want to be, we go back to the hygiene. Thinking about if you're eating things that are just fun food, but they're not really food, right? That means that the food, here's the vetting process. It has water in it, it has fiber, it has fresh nutrition, and it can't sit on the shelf for 2 or 3 years. You want to eat food that is going to go rotten. The fresh living food is a food that has natural medicine. There's medicine inside the food, so you will not have to be constipated. You will not have to worry about your skin. And here's the other thing that's fantastic. When you're eating for hygiene, a lot of the things that you're eating can actually go onto your hair and your skin, right? So these are the ways of the mothers and the grandmothers. So the white is for purification. Let's say if there's something that you've gone through, some type of trauma. Some women have experienced physical trauma or, trauma, intimate trauma, or they've been exposed to too much and you're trying to, or you've gone through a breakup or something, you might want to choose white for purification. Orange and red are colors like the sun that represent heat, and they're very energizing type colors, right? Blue is for peace, right? As well as this shade turquoise is a shade of blue, like the sky, that's very, very relaxing. Black is black, just like with the red, gold, and green, like the Rasta colors. Represents all the colors of the spectrum are in the black. So it's black like the soil, right? The fertility of the womb. So all of these different colors, if you have purple, purple is a color that represents spirituality. So all of these different colors have different things they represent. These are not mass produced, so each one is made very and crafted intentionally. Traditionally, there are tie-on type beads with these strings, right, that are very sturdy. Then we have different types that are made with a type of what they call fire line. And then sometimes by special request, we'll make some with some clasps. We also have some that can expand. So yours that I made for you will expand. So I keep waist beads on all the time. So maybe today I only have on 4, but I have some that can expand. Some people that are not used to them, they'll pop. But the ones that you tie on are the most traditional, right? And those are meant to stay on, right? And they are a reminder. So before you open up your womb, your panties, or your psyche to anybody, you remember your personal commitment to yourself. We also have some different precious and semi-precious stones, right? So we have like citrine. This one is tiger's eye. This one is some other precious and glass stones. So usually they'll be made with whoever the person is in mind. Before childbirth, women will be gifted. That's a rites of passage. Before you become a young maiden or a young woman, then you become a mother. That's a whole nother rites of passage. Many women might feel away because their body shape has changed, their hormones have changed. Now they have stretch marks. Now they're breastfeeding. So it's to have you remember your femininity and how special it is to be a mother. And so it's just another phase of life. So this is just some information. It's still more, but just to give you an introduction to waist bead training. And this is definitely something that we wanted to share here in Belize and Central America, because wherever we go, We share our culture, and culture is something that can ground us, right? Especially when it comes to today to hygiene. Hygiene, personal hygiene, which is also health, as well as your self-esteem, as well as the way that you carry yourself, right? One of the principles is, when a big reminder for these beads is we do not place ourselves in harm's way. Because if you want to look at the state of the people, you look at the women and you look at the girls and the mothers. So when the mothers are not happy and the mothers are not healthy, then we're going to not be so emotionally and mentally available to be able to put nurturing into the next generation. So if you want to see how people are doing, you look at the women and the girls. So reintroducing Afro flower and Waistbeads training is a way to take our culture and really use it in a very practical sense. It's not mukajuk, it's not cult, it's not religion. Culture can be very, very, very practical. This is a practical reminder to respect your femininity, right? Because we see a lot of that being lost in the music, right? And nobody's being courageous enough to stand up and to, you don't have to put something down to lift yourself up. But it's very, very important to make the distinction. We don't want to just talk about esteem on a superficial level. We want to take our culture and use it as ways to give beautiful reminders to the specialness of girls and women. So one of the principles is we do not place ourselves in harm's way. Not our body. Nobody's that fine. Nobody's words are that nice. Nobody's worth going to an abortion clinic. Nobody is worth having to be told that it was one time that you're going to be a parent that you're not prepared for, that you're not prepared psychologically for, financially, or to do it by yourself. No commitment up front, no demonstration of character, then they don't pass the vetting process. You do the background check on the character, right? If somebody wants to tap it too quick, that's a red flag. If somebody doesn't have accountability, and responsibility is not words, it is consistent actions only, no matter how fine they are. Does that make sense? Because you can easily lose all of your dreams and your hopes, and you might be a depressed mom. Because you did not choose very carefully somebody that has demonstrated they want to be a father. And it's a tremendous responsibility on women and girls because we are the holders and the keepers of this divine whom we make all the human beings come onto the planet. So you see a lot of human beings acting kind of crazy. It's almost like people, if they come, they come. Nobody's planning for people to come intentionally. So you want to be prepared, right? Not just to play with the baby. All right, so that is our introduction to training. So we're going to choose one for her. So you see one that you like? You can choose any one. The blue? Okay. So we are going to tie these on to her little waist, right? And these also, yours have crystals on them. So these are really nice. So, lift up. And let's come on your side. So we're going to put these around. So now when you receive your beads, there will usually be anchor beads on the end, right? So that you can tie them on. So these are tied on, these don't come off, right? So this is not for a show for, anybody. I don't want to see you winding up at the Mango Fest or doing the punta and let everybody put their hands on it. This is no easy access. When somebody gets too easy access, people, if you have something from the 99-cent store, do you throw it on the floor? Do people respect something from the 99-cent store? So your precious organs are not from the 99-cent store, right? The diamonds, you got to dig down deep to get to the diamonds, right? That's why they're precious. So no easy access, right? You can remember Auntie Kay told you that. So usually you'll have an anchor bead here. So this will help you when you go to tie it so that they don't all spill on the floor. So this will make it a little bit easier for you to tie. So we're going to see what we're going to. So we have a lot of extra beads, and we make them longer because some people have bigger waists, right? And so again, if you're on a weight release, a weight loss journey, then after you lose weight, it's going to drop. So she still has her nice feminine figure. If you eat too much, this is going to be like poking you a little bit. It's going to get a little tight, saying, sis, stop with the cake. Enough bun and cheese, right? So I'm going to put it down. So let's see. Do you want it there, or do you want it to come down by your hips? Okay, so remember now, it's a commitment. Once we tie it on, it's not going to come off. Okay, so we're going to go over some basic information that's very, very important for folks, young people, anyone that is going to be intimately active with other folks' reproductive organs. All right, so here we go. Common STDs as of April 14th, 2021, right? And you can look this up on Google. STDs hit an all-time high in the U.S. for the sixth consecutive year. Reported cases of STDs, chlamydia, gonorrhea, and syphilis in the U.S. hit an all-time high in 2019. That's from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Okay, folks may not be aware that there are actually 4 new STDs. 4 new STDs, and this is a report posted by CNN. And here they are, the names of them. So I hope that I'm pronouncing them correctly. So here they are. And they say these are emerging STIs that you can't afford to ignore as sexually transmitted diseases or infections. So Neisseria meningitis. Neisseria meningitis. This can cause invasive meningitis, a potentially deadly infection of the brain and the spinal cord's protective membranes. More commonly, it's gaining a reputation because of urogenital infections. One remarkable study from the 1970s described how a male chimpanzee contracted a urethral infection after passing a bacteria from its nose and throat to its own phallus through autofellatio. This animal frequently engages itself in oral genital contact, the authors duly noted. Now, roughly 5 to 10% of adults in the U.S. likely carry N. meningitis in the back of the nose and throat. Studies suggest they can potentially transmit the bacteria to partners through oral intimate relations, deep kissing, or other kinds of close contact that transmit infected droplets. Researchers aren't yet sure of these transmission routes have caused outbreaks of invasive forms of the disease amongst gay and bisexual men in Europe, Canada, and U.S. However, one study of urethritis caused by the N. meningitis in a separate group of men, all but one of whom were heterosexual, suggested that they contracted it from receiving oral relations. Scientists determined that a strain that hit U.S. cities in 2015 acquired DNA through genetic recombination with its close relative, N. gonorrhea, which causes gonorrhea. This mutation allowed the STI to spread more efficiently. 5 types of N. meningitis are responsible for most infections around the world. Fortunately, there are 2 vaccines that between them can offer some protection against all 5. The second of the newest STIs is M. genitalium, which is one of the smallest bacteria known. It's gaining an outsized reputation as a worrisome STI. Identified in the 1980s, the bacterium today infects an estimated 1 to 2% of people and is especially common in adolescents and young adults. M. genitalium infection, though often symptom-free, can mimic chlamydia or gonorrhea with persistent irritation of the urethra and cervix. Because it may trigger pelvic inflammatory disease in the female reproductive organs, it has been associated with infertility, miscarriage, premature birth, and even stillbirth. While condoms can prevent infection, researchers have sounded the alarm about M. genitalium's growing resistance to treatment with the antibiotics azithromycin and doxycycline. Quote, "My concern about this microorganism is that as it becomes ever more resistant, it will become ever more prevalent," says Matthew Golden, Director of Public Health, Seattle and King County HIV/STD Program. More testing could prevent the emergence of an M. genitalium superbug. However, diagnostic methods are already available based on testing urine and cervical or vaginal swabs are still rarely used and have yet to clear regulatory hurdles in the U.S. Number 3, Shigella flexneri. Shigellosis or Shigella dysentery is passed on by direct or indirect common with human feces. The infection causes severe stomach cramps and explosive bouts of blood and mucus-filled diarrhea, which helps perpetuate transmission of the bacteria. Although the disease is most commonly associated with young children and travelers in some low and middle income countries, researchers began documenting cases of shigellosis in gay and bisexual men in the 1970s. As flexneri, scientists believe essentially exploited a new niche for transmission through anal and oral intimate relations, which has led to multiple STI outbreaks around the world since then. Dimitri Daskalakis, Deputy Commissioner of the New York City Department of Health and Mental Hygiene, says the STI is fast becoming resistant to azithromycin, which is also used to treat gonorrhea. Because public health agencies are worried about Shigella's potential to drive the emergence of a gonorrhea superbug, he says many have adopted a nuanced treatment strategy. For adults who are otherwise healthy, officials now recommend withholding antibiotics and letting shigellosis take its unpleasant but generally limited course. And number 4 of the newest emerging STIs is lymphogranuloma venereum, or LGV. This STI, caused by unusual strains of Chlamydia trachomatis, can cause an awful infection, quote-unquote awful infection, according to Christopher Schiesel, a doctor of the One Medical Clinic in San Francisco's Castro neighborhood. LGV may first produce a temporary genital pimple, blister, or ulcer, and then invade the body's lymphatic system. Rectal infection can mimic inflammatory bowel disease and lead to chronic and severe colon and rectal abnormalities such as fistulas and strictures. Over the past decade, LGV has become increasingly common in Europe and North America and has been associated with multiple disease outbreaks, especially among gay and bisexual men. As with chlamydia, LGV can increase the risk of contracting HIV. Using condoms during vaginal or anal intimate relations can reduce the risk of infection, while treating LGV may require a 3-week course of antibiotics such as doxycycline. Okay. What race has the highest STD rate of 2020? Certain racial and ethnic groups, mainly African American, Hispanic, and American India / Alaska Native populations have high rates of STDs compared with rates for whites. The highest STD rate in the U.S. as of 2020. In Baltimore, America's #1 city with the highest STD rates, reportedly has the following STD cases: HIV 207, gonorrhea 4,231, chlamydia 7,636, syphilis 210. And this is just on those that are reported. African American women and sexually transmitted infections, the contextual influence of unbalanced sex ratios and individual risk behaviors. This study uses data from 564 African American women to examine the correlates of lifetime prevalence of a sexually transmitted infection, STI. Specifically, we test the effects of the perceptions about the availability of African American males, 5 partner characteristics, and drug history. At the bivariate level, women with an STI diagnosis were significantly more likely to have dated a man who was married, older, or have had sex with another man, involved in concurrent partnerships, and had been incarcerated. About half of the participants stated it was difficult to find an eligible African American male and attributed the limited pool of same-sex partners to drug trafficking, lack of monogamy, and high rates of incarceration. Multivariate analysis revealed having dated a man who had concurrent sexual relationships or had been incarcerated as well as drug use during sex, were positively associated with ever having an STI. Individual and contextual implications are addressed. Wow. So contextual influence, quote-unquote, eligible African American men and STI risk factors. Substantial research suggests that individual level risk behaviors and sexual beliefs play an important role in the persistent disparities in STI rates. Specifically, drug use has been consistently associated with a higher prevalence of STIs in the African American community. This is from a study Adamora and Schlonbeck 2005, et al. 2008. Drug and sexual networks are often overlapping, and drug use during sexual encounters is a risk factor for STIs. Also, in regards to sexual risk behaviors, less frequent condom use, early initiation of sexual intercourse, engaging in sex work or transactional relationships, and having concurrent partners have been identified as contributing to the greater prevalence of STIs among African Americans. Explores higher STI HIV rates among Black women. This is December 7, 2020. UIC Nursing's Natasha Crooks finds that socio-cultural conditions of protecting Black men, silence, cultural messaging, and societal expectations and stereotypes contribute to these higher rates. In her clinical experiences, UIC nursing assistant professor Natasha Crooks, PhD, and RN, saw young Black women with sexually transmitted infections and heard their stories about early pregnancies and sexual engagement. She knew from prior studies that Black girls and women were disproportionately affected by sexually transmitted infections, STIs, and HIV, but noted a gap in the literature when it came to understanding why. There was no framework or theories specific to Black women, she says. That's huge. You can't work to reduce STIs and HIV in this population if you don't understand their experiences. As a Black woman myself, I've really seen disparities and inequities play out with my own friends and family, which drew me to this area of Black female sexuality and STI HIV prevention. As lead author in a paper published in the Journal of Social Science and Medicine, Crooks explores socio-cultural conditions in which Black women are silenced about their sexuality, protect Black men who may be transmitting infections, and face cultural norms, stereotypes, and messaging about sexuality. She and her co-authors find that these are contributing factors to higher rates of HIV and STIs among Black women. Quote, our findings demonstrate the need for STI HIV prevention programs to address these socio-cultural conditions to improve Black female sexual health. Crooks and her co-authors wrote in the paper entitled Addressing Sexually Transmitted Infections in the Socio-Cultural Context of Black Heterosexual Relationships in the United States. Despite the fact that Black women have fewer sex partners and are less likely to engage in unprotected sex, their chlamydia rates were 5 times those of white women, and gonorrhea rates were 8.8 times higher, according to CDC data for 2018. Among women diagnosed with HIV in 2016, 61% were Black, compared with 19% who were white, according to the CDC. Crooks interviewed 20 women between the ages of 19 and 62 years old about their experiences with sexuality and sexual health. She and her co-authors found that Black women were socialized to protect men, but often did this at the expense of their own sexual health. Black heterosexual women's partners tend to be Black men, whose STI rates are higher compared to non-Black men, according to the paper. Women in the study said they found it empowering to protect Black men, even if it meant enduring hardship or forgiving men who betrayed them. I think this part goes back to history and the structural violence we experience with incarceration and lack of economic opportunities, Crooks said in the interview. The Black man is the pillar of the Black family, but they're often taken away, whether due to incarceration or being killed. That's where the protection comes in. We stand up for them, we protect them, we help them, we give them grace. The paper's authors found a historically rooted culture of silence among Black girls and women around sex and sexuality, which impacts STI and HIV risk making it difficult for girls and women to protect themselves or advocate condom use. Participants in the study shared personal stories of sexual assaults when they were younger, saying they stayed silent because they feared no one would believe them. Older participants described growing up with social norms that discussion of sex was not quote-unquote ladylike or not something a family discussed. Study of participants who also talked about underage black girls engaging in sexual relationships with older black men, describing this as a cultural norm. Girls whose bodies developed at an early age may have been pursued by men who viewed them as grown and capable of engaging in sex. Having an older sexual partner can be associated with intimate partner violence, which has been linked to lack of condom use and STI, HIV risk, the authors write. Differences in age could contribute to communication and power dynamics in sexual relationships that disadvantage young girls. Further, societal expectations and stereotypes to fulfill the sexual needs of men may prevent black women from communicating about sex or advocating for condom use, the authors write. Crook says an intervention to help them protect themselves at the, quote, girl phase of sexual development, end quote, is needed. Among her study participants, the mean age for the first intercourse was 11 years old and the median was 14 years old. Quote, as a black girl, there are so many messages coming at you, whether cultural, historical, or from the media, Crook says. Our main goal should be to protect black girls at the girl phase when they are particularly vulnerable to STI, sexual trauma, and early sexual engagement. The Male Marriage Pool Index, first introduced by William Julius Wilson in 1987, is a useful but understudied conceptual and interpretive perspective from which to consider racial disparities in STIs. Wilson's Male Marriage Pool Index suggests that the number of eligible, socially desirable African American men has decreased drastically, primarily due to diminished economic prospects, resulting in a shortage of marriageable African American men. The Male Marriage Pool Index is based on the assumption that African American women prefer African American male partners, and this assumption has been empirically supported. Since Wilson originally described the Male Marriage Pool Index, unprecedented rates of racial disparities in incarceration and decreased life expectancy for young African American men have further exacerbated the trends he described. According to the Bureau of Justice Statistics data, African American men are 6 times as likely as white men to be incarcerated, which is partially attributed to drug-related policies. Recent research demonstrates that mass incarceration affects not only the health of those incarcerated, but also the physical and behavioral health of their romantic partners. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, CDC, ranks homicide as the leading cause of death among African American men ages 15 to 34. Thus, the sex ratio is more unbalanced for African Americans than any other racial group. Black males per 100 black females are compared 96.4. White males per 100 white females, U.S. Census Bureau 2000. The gender imbalance in the African American community resulting from these broad societal trends has also been referred to by Braun in 2004 in an abbreviated fashion as the ratio. The reduced number of socially desirable African American male partners due to these social forces may have important effects on the transmission of STIs within the context of the African American community. Sexual networks differ between white and African American populations, with African American sexual networks being more racially homophilous, which can be partially explained by the racial segregation. Moreover, there's a higher prevalence of concurrent partnerships and greater sexual contact between the network's core, network members with many partners, and network members with few partners. The unbalanced sex ratio contributes to the formation of this sexual network structure and may provide African American men with considerable power in intimate relationships. Specifically, African American men may be seen as a commodity in this social context. This disadvantages African American women as they may have less leverage in advocating for monogamous sexual relationships and condom use, which subsequently impacts their sexual self outcomes. Due to stigma, this lack of bargaining power is even more pronounced among women who are drug users or may have a history of incarceration. Women who use drugs are more likely to have sexual networks comprised of other stigmatized individuals, i.e. individuals who use drugs or have an STI. Gender-related stigma is particularly pronounced as African American women are dichotomized into quote-unquote good or bad women based on their behaviors and are often held to a sexual double standard and experience greater blame associated with STI transmission. Conversely, African American male sexual behaviors such as inconsistent condom use or partner concurrency are normalized and even glorified, especially among young men. The stigma experienced by African American women has sexual health implications, found that drug-using and incarcerated women are less likely to use condoms consistently, and a sample of African American women who reported that it was difficult to find an African American male partner. Lower rates of monogamy and inconsistent use of condoms in the African American community, particularly among men, result in a context that facilitates the rapid spread of STIs. And I'm going to stop it right there.